so that's a good question. So in Insurance Solutions, we had our own in-house programs where I had some limited pin on the decision to take on the account, like with the Zurich program as an example. And we had a few other carriers, so I didn't have all the eggs in one basket. So of course, when a submission came in from an agent, we would do the best we could to fit it into one of our in-house buckets. A, it's more profitable. B, we just had a quicker turnaround, more control on the service and risk side. And the agents liked it better when we could have that kind of quick response to everything all the way around. Welcome to Insurance Shop Talk. This is the podcast where the world of commercial insurance gets a little closer to home. I'm your host, Eric Stein, and in every episode, we're taking a deep dive into the insurance industry, from the latest news and trends to in-depth interviews with InsurTech experts, carriers, and agency newsmakers. We're covering it all. So sit back, tune in, and let's start the conversation. All right, everybody. So today I'm turning the tables a little bit and becoming the guest, and then I have a colleague and friend of mine, Chad Carpenter, who has worked with Insurance Solutions quite some time and has moved on to other pastures actually more recently on the carrier side. But Chad, thanks for being the host for today's podcast about my new book.
Pleasure to be here, Eric.
I appreciate it. So yeah, today I wanted Chad because he was kind of in the beginnings of the Insurance Solutions story, my agency and brokerage that was created in 2009. And Chad was like one of my first hires in the production area and kind of saw everything, soup to nuts in terms of how it started, how it grew, and, what it's become. And so I like having that perspective on that as well. So Chad, again, appreciate you being here and kind of giving your flavor to, what the blueprint's about. And the actual full title, I always have to look at it myself. It's so long, but The Blueprint and Insurance Agency's Unconventional Rise to the Top. And it is available on Amazon right now. And we'll be kind of walking through a little bit about, my background and what the book's about. So Chad, I'll kind of turn the tables now and turn it over to you to kind of get going and anything you want to say as well.
Yeah, I'm pleased to be here, and thank you, Eric, and anyone listening. Eric's going to downplay himself, but it's just been so instrumental in my life. Took a chance on me when I was probably an average producer as a broker, and really helped me raise my game to an A level. And there's a lot of different skill sets and a lot of different things that I undertook to get there. But the long story short was I always dreamt in my life that I was going to be jogging or making a deal or doing something that I'm passionate about, and that there would be like an old man in a black car would come by and roll down that window and say, son, no interview needed. We're going to make all your dreams come true. And one day about 5 years ago, I bought the car of my dreams, and I was driving around in it, and I started realizing it hit me like a ton of bricks that I'm the guy in the car. And it was always me. And I was always looking out there, but the guy was really inside of me. And it takes certain people in your life, I would call them angels, to bring that out in you. And, Eric, I know you don't like the compliments, but you're one of those people for me, man. You took me to an A level, and now I get to take that on an even higher level. I get to pay that forward to people that are underneath me and people that work with me. And everybody is so appreciative for the inspiration I can provide them. But, I seeked inspiration as a young guy, and I found it. So, again, I'm just pleased to be here. Anything I can do to help, I want to do it. And I did read through your book. I thought it was fantastic. It brought me right back home to the life I lived for 10 years, and just really proud to be here and proud of you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Yeah, we had some great times. We definitely mixed the pleasure with the business. We'll go through some of that as well.
Let's go.
Gotcha.
So you want me to open up with a question?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, why not?
Let's go. So what inspired you to write The Blueprint and Insurance Agency's Unconventional Rise to the Top?
Yeah, I think at first it became about just organizing what happened in one long, or in this case, 120 something page, outline. Because I lived through it, and I never really went back from the beginning to towards the end here and put it all together. And I'd always have agents that would ask me that, when I was at dinners and things like that, kind of how I got started, how did you build the agency? What techniques did you use? And I would, of course, let them know, like I'm transparent. I think a lot of people in our industry, thank heavens, are, share and are transparent with each other. I'm in groups now that are just like that lets you peek behind the curtains, even though we might even be competitors sometimes. But anyway, I wanted to get the story out of sort of the beginning, the middle, and the end, and like maybe it could be useful, to other agencies and how I actually did it.
Absolutely. Well, you certainly had some dynamic people around you. When I came on board with your company, I remember meeting, some of the key players and the people around you, and they just seemed very astute, very smart. How did you know and have an eye and ear for recruiting? How did you know where those people were a fit? Because you were hiring people all over the country. People were working at their house. I mean, there was no way you knew that these people were going to be what they became. How did you do that? And did you just outwork everybody? Because that was something I felt like sitting at home working was there was one person working harder than me, and it was you. And I thought that was a great example to a guy like me.
No, no, that's cool. Yeah, like at the time, this is, 2009, there weren't people working remote, at that point. That wasn't very common. I mean, as it is now after COVID, especially. And there wasn't a lot of cloud-based, applications that you could use that everyone would be on the same system, whether they're at their home office. Like this is back in that day that was just sort of the beginnings of the remote opportunities and cloud-based applications. So I did luckily knew and worked with a lot of agents, a lot of underwriting folks on the carrier side in underwriting and CSRs in production. In my prior history, working as in sales management for PEO and HR companies across the country that, how I kind of got in the business. And so, that helped me meet people. And the cool thing was having to, keep my costs lower by not having office space. B, I could literally locate and have the best talent because it didn't matter about their location. Again, all this is common sense now in many cases, although as you hear even today, like Amazon and others are trying to bring more people back in the office, and it's causing the opposite effect of turmoil to do it that way. But at that point in 09, 010, or 2010, that just was not common, but it did let me get the best talent in place. So yeah, I was appreciative of that.
Something reminded me of you reading through your book was it wasn't only employees and 1099s you'd hired. You had figured out a way to get what presumably were competitors to really not just work with us, but we made deals with each other. There were people that could send us referrals. We could send them referrals. And it almost seemed like you termed this phrase I'd never heard before, frenemies, which now is out there, but you had said that. And it was like, it wasn't a negative connotation. It was almost like this is somebody that presumably we compete with, but we also do deals with if like our market could do it and their market couldn't, or if we had a market we could find that could do it. How did you piece together from a managerial standpoint of you didn't just need people that worked for you, but you also wanted like people that worked with you that were more your equals? And then how did you bring them in to be able to create that kind of bubble of revenue? Because I feel like that's what really helped us take off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I put that in the book about the alternative market alliance I tried to, consolidate competitors, if you will, so we could all work together. And in some cases that worked out, in some cases it didn't. But yeah, I knew these folks like Shane and some others, Steve Martino, Curtis Prince, these guys from working together. They each had their own expertise, their own markets that they had very, very deep relationships with. You had to work with them anyway to get to those markets. It wasn't like I could pick the phone up and say, I want to start working with that particular carrier program. So we would end up sending each other submissions. They would send me submissions as well. And to back up, a little bit, we didn't even talk about it, but for those that don't know, Insurance Solutions, Insurance Solutions is a national brokerage specializing in alternative workers' comp, and only dealing with the property and casualty insurance agent channel. So just to be clear. So then back over to that question. So then being that we were helping each other anyway, referring each other accounts anyway, like you mentioned, I try to even take it deeper and go, hey, look, let's try to present ourselves as a larger force for distribution, similar like a agency cluster model, like a hub or an ISU type of deal, but do it in this brokerage world. And we ended up sharing some systems, some back office support vendors, again collaborating. In the end, unfortunately, it did very well from a revenue point, but trying to continue to keep everybody together and coordinate, that entrepreneurial spirit ended up not working, to be honest. And we ended up, just forming that alliance. We kept working together. We just weren't as deep as we could. I think we started crossing crossing over each other's agencies, and it became really confusing. So I think at the end, disbanding that formal alliance, was probably a good idea, but continuing to work together and referring each other business was also a good idea, so it all kind of worked out.
Yeah, what I thought was so strong about the way you set up the sales force was you did train us all and you really helped us. You coined the phrase not being led around by your nose, kind of staying in front of the agent, making sure they knew that they were the customer, but also we were going to drive the sale and make sure that, for instance, if they didn't sell 3 deals in a row with us, we weren't going to give them the next one until we could sit in front of the client and present and then close it with them, right? So you had all these little tricks and these experience things that you put together with the sales force. And then it seemed like our product for your program wasn't as strong as some of the products we had access to, but then their sales force wasn't good. So you figured out, if I can insert my sales force into this product that maybe, let's say, more robust than our product, then all of a sudden we were a great team with that other company. And I think the company I'm speaking of. Walk us through that. How did your mind come up with, I'm going to take my sales force, which is my core strength, and align it with this product, which is, again, more robust, maybe had more capital than our product, the ability to write crazier stuff. How did you figure all that out?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So in Insurance Solutions, we had our own in-house programs where I had some limited pin on the decision to take on the account, like with the Zurich program as an example. And we had a few other carriers, so I didn't have all the eggs in one basket. So of course, when a submission came in from an agent, we would do the best we could to fit it into one of our in-house buckets. A, it's more profitable. B, we just had a quicker turnaround, more control on the service and risk side. And the agents liked it better when we could have that kind of quick response to everything all the way around. So, however, there was a limited capacity to those products. So, maybe a state or class code like roofing or long haul trucking, things like that, I couldn't do. So we obviously wanted to continue to have other markets. So we would, in conferences and at, other events, I would meet some of the players in that, would help to set up, maybe they, like you said, they had their own internal sales force at their programs, but they weren't actually getting any distribution from the insurance agent channel. So our pitch back was, hey, look, let us handle the agents. Your W-2 folks keep knocking on doors, no problem. And let us show you what we can do. And then as many times as we could, we tried to get some exclusivity because that just gave us more communication and integration, with that program, even as much as like they were literally in our same CRM where we press a button and it releases all the documents and data into their CRM. And again, this is back 09, 010, 011 when even APIs weren't really that well known, right? And so we're already starting to work in that synergy as well as even help with their pricing. So it would be like an MGU arrangement in that way. And then when you have that kind of horsepower and the kind of products like these other folks had that we couldn't do it internally, we were just crushing it with the agents, just loving it because the pricing was great, the carriers were phenomenal, service was good, because of our integration with the vendor, we acted as if it was like in-house. So yeah, the more that we could align ourselves with really good partners like that, that was a huge goal, for us and to help our agents.
Something I thought that I really thought highly of you about was you were always kind of guarded towards me. It felt like about personal stuff, and I was always wanting to get personal with you because I wanted to know how you did what you did. And your book answered so many questions for me. But something that struck me in the first page of the book was you dedicated the book to your father. And I'd never heard about your father other than I knew that there was a business that was in Columbus that he had owned, and you had watched him when you grew up. But I'd heard about your mother, and I knew one of your brothers that worked with us some, but I'd never heard of your father. And to see that you had dedicated your book to him and his entrepreneurial spirit, it meant the world to me. So I've got a question, but my comment before that is, my father's my best friend, and he lives in my same neighborhood, and I'm just so fortunate and blessed that he's a part of my life. And when I saw that you were that close to your father, yet I didn't know that. It just struck me as something that, man, that guy would be so proud of you today. And if he could see what I've seen and what you've done for me, I think so much of this life is figuring out what you want from the world and giving exactly that to the world precisely. And you did that for me. I'm doing that for others, but it sounds like your father did that for you. Can you tell us a little bit about some childhood experiences with business where you kind of gleaned in and said, this is what I want to do, and this is why?
Yeah, he owned like a men's retail store, again, back in Columbus, Georgia, which is like 2 hours south of Atlanta, a very small town. It's actually the second largest city in Georgia, but no one would ever know it. And he was one of the first retail stores in a mall at that time. There weren't many anchor stores that specialize in retail like a Macy's or the Gayfers at that time, and so on. So he was it. He was like the mayor of the town. Like everyone would go buy their Easter Sunday suit. Remember when people would dress up to go, for Easter services? So they all, I would go places or we'd be in restaurants and could barely eat because like people keep coming up to him. So so it's hilarious. But so what really got me going, he was very entrepreneurial, created his own men's store, ended up doing another location that was like like a men's warehouse, a large, strip mall type location, single location. And so he was ahead of his time on that, worked his, tail off. I would help work in the stores during the holidays, things like that.
Oh, wow.
Even as a young kid. P&C agents, have you run into Byberg, which is a Berkshire Hathaway company quoting workers' comp for either your prospects or clients? Well, great news. Insurance Solutions, a national MGA, has an appointment that is set up to allow you to quote, bind, and service Byberg at your agency. And the coverage is in all states. It's A-rated. Startups are even accepted. There's $125,000 maximum premium. And some of the tough industries they write are construction, transportation, that includes towing and parcel delivery, manufacturing, security guards that are armed and unarmed, motor mediation, and many more. So go to our website at insurancesolutions.net, click the Get Appointed link. We'll get you logins for you and your team and can set up a webinar for training if you'd like. Also, feel free to email info@insurancesolutions.net and I can handle the submission myself, or call 770-402-5343. Be glad to speak to you and give you more detail. Thanks. So he didn't get out quick enough when the chain stores finally did start coming in to that mall that he was in, and so, he ended up having to shut that store down. So what it told me was, hey, when you're kind of towards the top, don't get emotional, because that's all he did all his life, was retail. Growing up after college, that's what he stayed in it, built his own business. So when you're at the top, take it and run. Don't continue to do it just for the sake of doing it because you love the industry. Take the winnings, take money off the table. So I think that taught me the most important thing, I believe.
Well, I'm sure that was a tough conversation. I appreciate you saying all that because, like I said, I'd really never heard about it. But I will tell you this: you live on through him, and what he did for you, you've done for others, and that's just amazing. So I again think the world of that. I also noticed you dedicated your book to your wife and your daughters, who I did know and I did hear about some when we worked together. But man, you were always traveling, you were always working, you were always the first to respond to stuff at any hour of the night. I have no idea how you were able to be around your family, because it seemed like you were always working. You know, when you dedicated your book to them, you mentioned, you know, the countless hours you had to spend away and how they were, you know, obviously understood that. But looking back, how did you balance that? It seemed like I said, to me, you were always working. How did you balance your time with them?
Oh yeah, that's the credit to my wife. I didn't have that much work-life balance. So again, another reason to of cutting back some of the hours by selling to private equity here toward the end. But no, my wife ran the store. Without her, this thing wouldn't have happened. There wouldn't have been the success that I had. And if, of course, because of all the travel and so on, you didn't get to see the kids as much. But I know a lot of agents and agency owners are in that exact same boat. And with, you got to have a good partner. And she took care of the whole thing. If she wouldn't have done it, then I would have had to probably sell the business way earlier. And I definitely wouldn't have been as successful.
When you were a kid, what did you want to do when you grew up?
I knew it was going to be something in sales, and marketing. So, I went to the University of Georgia with an advertising degree and business degree. So something in that area, and try to have I knew that because of the retail lifestyle, working 7 days a week basically, that wasn't for me. So the insurance piece with the residual component was always enticing.
Well, I'll say, to be a business owner, you were the most generous of any business owner I ever met. And it wasn't just about sales and commission and always keeping your word and always paying me and always paying everybody. You always did that. But whenever we would get a chance to go out, or whenever we'd bring people in from around the country and we would go to a dinner or whatever, you were just more than gracious about. There was never a limit. There was never a thing. It was almost like we were just part of your deal, and you were just going to take care of us. And I tell you, from a young guy perspective then, looking at you, it just seemed like the perfect fit. And that made me feel so valuable that, it wasn't like a drink coupon here or like whatever. It was like, hey, we're going, you're part of this. Let's do it. And you always made me feel like an equal. And I remember your CFO, who I really liked a lot, would say, Chad, Eric doesn't have to take your opinion, but if he asks for it and you give it to him, that should be enough for you. And in thinking back, like, that's what every young person in business and maybe older person that's not in charge wants, is they just want a voice. And you were really able to give me, and I feel like my counterparts and the other people there, a voice. How did you balance that when obviously you were the one who was going to take the rise or fall? You were the one who was paying the bill. And then yet you were able to give all of us a voice. Was that hard for you ego wise? What was the goal with all that?
No, I definitely like to get the on the street, feedback, and as quick as we possibly could to figure out what is not working so we could change it, so we could, be agile. And again, I'm preaching to the choir for agency owners and people who have that philosophy now. That's very common. You don't want to, make decisions in a vacuum, or something's not working. Our message is not getting out. Our markets are not performing for the agents. You've got to make that change and pivot. So I definitely want to listen to all you guys on that. And again, the other thing that's sort of on a separate note with the fun part, being that we are putting so many hours in, another thing I like doing was the events and for agents where we, have a nice, one of the nicest, like Mastro's in Newport Beach, and in New York, we did some nice places where we'd have agent events. We'll bring in program underwriters. We'd have cocktails, kind of schmooze, and the underwriters would go into their information. So like the agents could meet them and then get to know us better in terms of sales teams and underwriting teams internally, and then, go out and have fun and so on. So I kind of treated it like, if I'm going to work this hard, then let's turn this into more of a party environment and a fun environment. Because, hey, insurance agents, they like that and we like that. So let's meld that together. And like, we're all working our tail off, and, it's almost like, this was like a vacation, to have this kind of fund together on the company's dime and get the tax write-off, So that helped by the way, that was my generosity mode was more like, I knew we were getting like a entertainment expense off of this, and we all got to hang out together, kind of like fraternity brothers. And then let the agents join into that, and they become fraternity brothers, and it was a ton of fun. So I was trying to kind of mimic some other folks in the industry that I respected and had gone to some of their events and sort of borrowed some of their ideas because they really added the fun layer to it.
Yeah, and you were part of that. You were definitely fun and always willing and just awesome. So that was always a good time. Moving on to some other things, when you experience highs and lows in the insurance market, what was the most challenging period and how did you navigate through that?
Yeah, so like we talked a little bit earlier about that higher deductible program that we had with Zurich, then that was what really kind of launched us in terms of having that. We always had regional carriers, maybe some carriers that were lesser rated than Zurich. So it was always challenging to, pitch that back to an agency who's got an E&O issue, or a client vendor had to have a certain rating, for their certificates and so on. And so we finally kind of got to that level with Zurich, nationwide, great name, A-rated. And then so with that came, and it was a hard market, especially in California, New York at that time that we created this. And so it was like shooting ducks in a barrel. Like the agents were just crushing it with sales, and it was exciting. At the same time, I was always, we always specialize in that alternative market. So I always had the risk management, nurse case management, some claims management in place, because some of these carriers wouldn't let you really get in that deep in with the claim. But we had the risk mitigation piece locked down. And so I'm thinking in my head, all right, as we grow, I'm on a very high deductible program. I think I was on like a $500,000 deductible for every single claim, that occurred in that program. So that could be a $50,000 premium to the customer, and he has, one claim worth, 300 grand, we're done with that account in terms of profit, right? So so that's why we had to have those risk pieces in place. But what I didn't count on was that quick growth because of the hard market, in terms of how that collateral would work that you're going to have to come up with as you grow. And if you have claims, you better be ready to have a bunch of cash behind you with a truck to help facilitate, that collateral payment when you grow that premium. So that, along with, and I've kind of delved in a lot more detail in the book about the different models here, but that, along with being able to have an actuary create our pricing model, and base this on some cash flow scenarios that would help to make sure we're pricing it accurately, in the beginning. And again, I wasn't trying to force fit bad risk in terms of the client's attitude toward risk. That's what you're really looking for in workers' comp. I wasn't trying to force fit it in the program out of greed or anything, because I was always fine referring this to one of our other programs like we just talked about. If it doesn't fit in-house, take it out and just make the sale for the agent, right? Get a solution. So that was always our mindset. Of course, if it did fit, you want that because it's a good profit margin there, a better profit margin than having to just receive a commission. Now you have ownership in it. But long story short, I didn't really count on that, the pricing mechanism and the growth that would really spike the collateral. And I needed to get way ahead of that in terms of having more cash behind me to fund it. And when you're in a service business with no, assets in terms of equipment or accounts receivable, because everything was pay as you go in insurance, there's no receivables. So it's very hard to get the financing. And so luckily toward the, fifth year or so of the program is when more private equity started coming into the space. And that's when I got a cash infusion technically, at that point.
Got it. I'll tell you, that's some history right there. So you discussed the importance of identifying market gaps. What advice would you give P&C agents looking to identify and capitalize on such gaps in their own market?
I think a lot of agencies are now, it's a commonplace to do it where you're going to focus on a niche, and you become an expert in that niche. So obviously our niche was that hard to place client, had higher claims, higher mod, so that agents, of course, are going to always turn to their existing appointed markets first. And then when they couldn't place it, that's when they would turn to us, because we had the ways to write that non-standard risk, kind of like an auto, personal auto. But in terms of this, what I would recommend to agents would be, find states like New York, and California in certain cases, Illinois, the tough states to write business, locate a niche that matches up with either a carrier you already have or a carrier you're trying to, attract to help write this business, so that you've got an edge on that. Like, I know that some people specialize in temporary staffing clients, that niche. That's a very hard niche to write. Things are not controlled because these employees are at different work sites. They don't all come into like a factory. If that temp staffing agency has any kind of bad claims, the markets become even less and less. So like that type of scenario where if possible, that they've got market fit, and it's really a tough one, and become an expert in that if you're not already, to do it. So I think a lot of agents now know that, and are not as much as generalists as they used to be. So the more niches, the better. And anything that you can do with a specific carrier where every agent's not already appointed with that carrier, that kind of semi-exclusivity or regional exclusivity, all that really helps to drive revenue.
Yeah, and just to clarify, something that was so unique looking at your business model to me when I was there was we would go after undesirable business, probably with undesirable markets, and we could write business. And I think so many agency owners and agency folks that listen to this would think, oh, well, we don't want to go after the undesirable stuff. But we had this such sound risk management program and philosophy that wasn't the belief was we could write and rehab any company that had management buy-in with our way of staying ahead and staying on offense when it comes to work comp claims?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's like, unlike in, let's say, property and general liability, where there's no hardly anything you can do really for risk mitigation. Yeah, if that client has the attitude that they are going to listen to what the recommendations are for, return to work light duty. Many clients are unaware of how that works. Like, all they see it as like an outlay of money to pay the employee to do nothing. But I know in the agency world, we all know that is crucial to get that employee back to work, or be, part of that if they are able to work and released to return to light duty. And so having a return to work program, we set up at that time, again, this was back in the day, we had an online risk management course that we could stage in little, nuggets, and online and trackable, so that the supervisors could take these courses in, ladder safety, OSHA, whatever. Also just our model too of how to hire, how to do return to work and light duty programs. We combined it with some of the traditional safety, but with our specific program, and launched that out, and gave like Starbucks gift cards out to the supervisors if they would just complete each one of the courses, because we knew that would, get the information out, in addition to having physical and telephonic help, and then again the back end. So yeah, that having also that nurses on staff, not just waiting on the carrier because they're slow. We had to mitigate, just like agencies do now when they do claim intake for their customers. We were taking that on steroids and doing triage, and we were having our nurse, call the doctor's office after an appointment and talk to the doctor and try to get that person released to light duty if that was one option. Let them know that we had a light duty program pretty much for anything, even if they needed us, to lay in the bed. We had a way to have a light duty program. So she was pitching that back in medical terms. She start with the medical, but then get right into how, hey, we have a return to work program for this employee. that we need done. It's a manual that needs to be created for this client, and so on. And she would talk them into doing light duty. So that's how I think those creative ideas that really our late great Steve Petty created, you know, he did it.
Well, and I think what you're saying, just to conjecture some of that, is we had a return to work program for 100% of any restriction, any problem an employee had. There was a way to make them earn that paycheck. And what our friend Steve Petty would always say is, we want to create a culture of earners at your workplace. And when you have a small construction agency or construction company that has some major claims, a lot of times fraud and waste and abuse spreads around quickly. You have family members working there. You have people getting a check for not working. And when you can say, we have a return to work plan for you no matter what, you scare off the right people to not want to get a job at your place. And I think if I'm an insurance agent owner listening to this, the one thing I would think is, well, I'm going after desirable stuff for the carriers on the stuff they want. Well, so is everyone else. And we all have the same markets. So what you did that was so brilliant was you differentiated yourself by going after negative stuff. I mean, I felt like I was making a negative sale. I was getting somebody on the phone that was mad. I had a quote that was better than anything they had in front of them, and they were mad at me. And all I had to do was explain in very plain terms what it was they were getting into. And by the way, it involved a lot more than workers' comp, a lot of times stuff they didn't want. But in order to get the workers' comp, are you willing to do this, this, and this? And so often it would be like, well, we're not willing to do that. We're not going to co-employ our company. And it'd be like, well, okay, I guess you're not going to save $50,000 from the assigned risk pool. And then it would be like, wait a minute, yes, we are going to do this. We're more than willing to do it. So it was like this negative turnaround sale that was so beautiful, because when it worked, it was just perfect. And then you kind of had security with those accounts, because where else are they going to go? They had nowhere to go. And then the greatest thing about your product was we kept rates the same year over year over year, and there was no renewal. There was no even talk about that. It was just like, you're good to go for as long as you're okay in this program. And I thought that was such a, now that I'm on a carrier side, I'm touching stuff every year, and it's the same renewal and the same this, it's such a hassle. You're revisiting and almost remarketing accounts every year. It's crazy. And so I really liked your philosophy. I liked the way you did that. But the number one thing you did that differentiated your business was you were the master at lead sources. And now you're going to tell us what you did. And everybody say, oh, everybody does that. But this is back in 2009, 2010. You were getting me, at some point, I was seeing 200 submissions a week. And I was writing.
You were crying uncle, though, man. I remember he was like, hey, I just want you to know I can't get to these, $1,000 premiums anymore.
Yeah. So I was writing 3 or 4 a week, right? But the thing was, it wasn't about a hit ratio. It was about the number of leads. And just walk us through, how did you come up with that, and what did you do? And that now is so commonplace, but tell us about how innovative that was at the time.
Yeah, it's funny because like back in the day, this was again a fortunate piece of timing, but the email marketing was just starting out, back at that time. No one in the insurance world was doing mass scale email blasts on programs. So we would just send agents, if they're getting all day, every day now, an email, one, I don't know, less than a page or a half page of a document, bulleting out, new program for trucking, new program for, whatever, and what the minimums are and how to submit. And when and also you at that time, you had to have a you couldn't use Constant Contact. I don't even know if that was around back then. You had to have a very expensive CRM system, client relationship management system, to do outbound email in mass, because, we were marketing to like 50, 60,000 agents. So we need to be able to press a button, to make that send go. So that was, again, very rare back then to have that kind of volume of an email. A lot of people were just doing intermittent emailing of programs, but not on a mass scale. So when we did it, we were just, our hit ratio, getting a submission plus on top of the hard market, you combine those two things, and no one's really in the email field. That was crushing it. Then we ended up having to add, later, as things became more prevalent in email, we had to add layers of telemarketing using folks in the Philippines who have more of a Hispanic accent and English accent for that. And that really helped follow up. Their goal was really just to see if the agent had a submission they needed assistance with, or would they like to meet with somebody like you on the phone or in person, depending on where they're located, to go through it, specifically if that program that we're promoting plus all the other programs we offer. So telemarketing, email marketing, also that CRM was more like a Pardot program where it would track the engagement of an agent. How often are they communicating with us? And it would track that and scale it and then customize messaging to them. So that was all new back in the day. Now these are similar, very common, plays.
Yeah, something you mentioned, offshore, nearshore markets. I remember working with the company in India that you had hired several seats on, and how good you made them out to be with after being trained and figuring things out. And I think you mentioned in the book how highly educated all these people from India were. I think every last one of them had an MBA. Very smart, very conscientious, very good workers, but they were really unclear if things weren't spelled out exactly what to do. So I think you made the decision that maybe they shouldn't be client facing, but they could do all the background work. And what that did for people like me and the people that worked with me, especially the people that were doing more of the service work, was it took that off their plate and it let them be more the brains of the operation, like a producer role would be, or an AE, to where we could strategize, we could get in front of the client, we could help onboard, we could do anything the client needed, because we were actually freed up, and the people that worked with me on onboarding and everything else, they were freed up enough to do that. So I think that the India thing really saved us in a lot of ways. I think it was smart on your part because they weren't employees that could sue you, let's say, but they seemed like they were very dedicated. And it just seemed like a very good group. Did you have that experience? Again, you were at the top and I was just kind of seeing the day to day, but if I ever sent anything to them, it was like they were on it. And I really appreciate that, because I can't say the same today, if I'm working at wherever I'm working and say, hey, I got to have this done. If the people don't like me, it might not be done. So it's a tough thing in business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I had some motives behind doing the offshore at the time. Again, that was something newer. A lot of agencies now are delving into virtual assistants and things in different areas of the world, which I like seeing because I think it's a great benefit. In this model with India, what I was looking for, A, keep overhead costs low, B, keep our front-facing people like yourself, like our underwriters and our service team. I could pay those folks a lot of money now because I wasn't absorbing, 60, 70, 50, 60, $40,000 salaries in back office people doing data entry, scrubbing submissions, emailing missing information to either you or the agent. So the motivation was, and then what you just said, I didn't want to have a lot of staff just from a keeping it lean for cost, but just the whole, bureaucracy that comes of having a lot of staff at the time. And I was in creating a new program, new agency, if you will, scratch agency, technically. So you want to keep your costs and overhead low, but so you have all these selfish reasons to do it, but it turned out to, be it where I could scale as we grew, and we're talking, $1,200 a month for a 40-hour a week person, so and they are, as you mentioned, very intelligent, very thorough, and the team that we hired in India, had a great training program and documented everything. We, in an agency, you don't have time to document every process. Usually, some of the larger agencies do, or even sometimes even on the smaller carrier side, like where you're working. So so that was really a professional way to handle it. And it really, like, having someone data entry, 1,000 submissions a month into our system versus an underwriter having to do their own, they loved it. They were just excited because they got to do what they enjoyed, which is just reviewing the information, so, and then our back office and sales teams as well. But one advice, and I think I put this in the book too, would be if an agency, as you guys are hiring VAs and virtual assistants, you definitely want, if you're not already doing it, you want to keep one person in the agency, usually one of your, management team or someone has good communication skill to be the liaison between your office and the, offshore, nearshore firm. And the reason is that you want all your US folks to come. In our side, it was Kayla, right? She handled the management of the program. So he would meet every week with the team in India and the management team there to go through issues and problems, what was not working. So you want to keep the confidence level up of your US team, your staff. And by having someone in the US, they can basically bitch to or send, hey, this error keeps happening over and over again. I've tried to get it corrected by emailing them, letting them know what to do. They won't do it. So they aren't as frustrated, right? And then Kayla would then meet with the management team, get those issues resolved, keep following up until they got the process right. And she was the one training them on what we really needed. And they didn't have to take the time of one of our underwriters or our salespeople to actually do that work, training about this particular scenario, what they needed to have done. So that really made it a lot more effective. I tried it without a Kayla helping, and everybody just started saying, you know what? They're making so many errors. I'm just going to do it myself. I don't have time to explain this to them. By the time I explain it to them, I can do it myself, And so, and plus people, and especially have a lot less patience for that versus if the person's sitting next to them in the cubicle, they'll be more inclined to help train, so they know that's, but you got to work with them. You got to live them. Here, this is like a vendor in some of the mind. But then after things really started getting smooth, because of Kayla's help, that's when the appreciation came in. What you're saying, it's like these guys are awesome, and I can do everything in a second, and I don't have to wait. Especially in sales, we want our quote back. We want this entered in now, the block markets. We need it like now, and we're getting ticked if it's not done quick. So, not having to pay, 40, 50 grand a year for 20 of those. And we ended up with, I think, over, I don't know, 40 or 50 full-time people at one point to do all our processing because we grew so quickly.
Well, and you said that exactly right. I was thinking in a previous life before I worked with you, I was with a public insurance broker, and they had just brought on India in some capacity, and everybody did exactly what you just said. They didn't have a manager internally communicating, and it just didn't work. And everybody was like, what is this? And no one's going to use this because like the communication wasn't there and everything else. So to your point, having a Kayla in our situation or somebody that's on a management team, maybe a COO type, being in control of that relationship and being able to write well, Kayla could really write things out well and put steps together. What we learned about the Indian folks we worked with was they were awesome about following instructions. They were not good at like reasoning and saying, okay, we think we want to do something like this. What do you think? You couldn't leave it open-ended. But if you could give them step-by-step instructions, they were like the best. And that's what I think you put that together, and you did a good job talking about it. But I just wanted to reiterate, without that piece, the thing just is just discombobulated, and there's no communication. It just doesn't work well. So kudos to you. That was very good. Looking at some other things, if you are looking at, you emphasize the role of technology in the book. I know you had mentioned something to me that changed my career where you said, Chad, if you could ever find technology that can help your sales, you better buy it and learn it and know it better than anyone else. And that was some of the best advice, even though I'm terrible at technology, that I've ever received. Tell us about some of the technological innovations you had. And I know you created an app at one point. You were doing all kinds of stuff. But what was some of the tech that paid off the most for you? Because one thing I want to say is you tried 1,000 things for 2 or 3 or 4 of them to work. I mean, you were big about it. And if anybody's an entrepreneur listening to this entrepreneur I'm interviewing was willing to try anything. We would try any line of business, and then it would flop, and then we'd go back to whatever. But you were so good at just being open to change, where I think the rest of us were like, here's where we're making our money. Why are you trying that? So what was the thought process behind all that?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to actually build my own, CRM using offshore. I got so excited about, offshore in India and how inexpensive it was. Like, why am I going to pay this when I can just have them build my own? But what happened when I did try it, it was a flop. It took too much time. It was going to start being an expensive experiment taken away from the core business. So we ended up just purchasing some off-the-shelf technology that really had a lot of bells and whistles, but they had a good way of getting it. It was kind of expensive to program, but you had a way, or they were very professional in how they would program and things for us, to get all our forms and agreements to be digital. Again, much of this is now available very easily, but at that time they weren't. Nothing was that consolidated. I think agents are dealing with like your AMS 360 and other epics and all that. That no one's got the one all fit solution. But this firm was able to go ahead and structure sprints to get the programming done. Again, having someone like a Kayla in charge of that, who has that sort of brain power to manage that project, because I sure didn't. I knew what I wanted. I wanted to tell Kayla how I wanted it, and she understood it because she was living in the same world, and then letting Kayla communicate that. So that was a key piece, to have a cloud-based system. All of our data is in one place, set up more for brokerages. But again, now agents, I think can lean, my advice would be now to an agent is that the CRM, the systems that are out there, like the one that I like now is called Automate 365. I actually had Vlad, the one of the principals on a podcast. So if you hadn't had a chance to listen to that, that's Automate 365. And they've got about, in a CRM environment, it can integrate back with your AMS. So you don't have to change your AMS, because that's a pain in the neck in itself. But just getting a CRM system, a client relationship management system, so that all of your sales team and service team can be on the same page on prospects, right? And leaving all your, bound policy information and data in your AMS. So, integrating that, I would, they are a whole lot less expensive. Where I was paying, probably after programming, 6 figures a year. Now the CRMs that can do 30 different vendors, from a calendar program to the massive email blasts, to video, to a chat bot, everything already built in now, like 40 vendors that you would have to go out and find, DocuSign, everything's built into this. And for like, $5,000 a year, and you can use it right off the shelf, and it's cloud-based. So that's how things have changed versus 6 figures to that. So I would highly recommend, if an agent has an agency is not using a CRM system, to definitely look at Automate. And there's another one called Agency Zoom that I think actually Vertifor did buy, that integrates with AMS 360. That's a really good product too.
Something you fell into that you really set me up for success with was working at home. And it took me about a year to figure out how to work at home. But once I got it, I realized I was getting 2 to 3 times much done in a day as I could get in an office, because I like to talk about sports and everything else. And without that distraction, it was just so easy to put my head down and work. 8 years after I started working for you, I had just left, I think, and worked for a new company, and COVID hit. And this new company, no one had ever worked at their home. And all the agents I'd worked with, none of them had ever worked at their home. And all of a sudden I was back at home, like in my spot, going, this is it for me. And the success started coming. And not only was I able to help our counterparts work at home, but even the agents I worked with and their people that they couldn't just yell over their desk and say, hey, Susie, print this or whatever. I was helping them learn how to work at home. And that advantage you had given me by just having the foresight of working at home and running your own schedule. And I finally figured out, and I would say you agree, that if I can run my own day, it's going to be very successful. If somebody's breathing down my neck, I'm not that type of guy. It's not going to work. So that freedom you gave us with the constraint of obviously having 1,000 emails a day and figuring out how to sell and all that stuff was just unbelievable. And what it did for me was it showed me that I was in control of my destiny and no one was going to force it. But if I wanted to push it as hard as I could, I could do that. And there was always leads there for me you had, and you just had the thing set up perfect. The one thing I'm taking away from this is that you might have gotten everything out of everybody and done it the right way. Like you keep saying, like, India saved me a lot of money, or, I had the right person for this, or I hired the right thing for this. It seemed like whatever you were doing was very cost effective. Would you say that if you were less concerned about cost effectiveness, would we have ever gotten to the point we were? It seems like maybe that was the key to everything, was that you got the most out of everything, but by being giving, by being kind, but you were trying to figure out how to do it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I think well, kind of tying that back into COVID, like the only positive of COVID for us was like, as you mentioned, like everyone else in the organizations that are out there are having to make a change in the phone systems and the, getting the computers to work for everybody at home for, that maybe weren't cloud-based or systems that weren't cloud-based and having to like dial into network. We didn't have to deal with any of that transition. And like when I had to get on the call with our team, during COVID and like try to make everybody, even though I'm freaking out about it right in the beginning, it was like it was a big deal, like you don't know if you're gonna personally die or not. We had people on our team get COVID in the hospital on ventilators, like in California as an example.
Oh my gosh.
So it was becoming a real deal. So I'm having to get on to make a State of the Union address, but and that was the big positive is, hey guys, everyone out there is struggling to do what we already are doing, and offices are shut down, but we didn't affect us because we just kept moving, on our day. So yeah, I think having that work from home scenario really helped everybody, as you said, and again helped us to attract better people. Like now when I'm recruiting people at Insurance Solutions and I'm trying to maybe fill an office area like in Arizona or Georgia as an example, and we're trying to find talent, in those areas, and we're just being restricted, in terms of that. So yeah, that really is challenging, not having the work from home piece as an option. So I would highly recommend, you do have to, of course, find the right person that can do it. And a lot of people, the good news is, are very honest about, can they really work from home or not? Maybe they don't have kids running around and, no sitter and the environments, there's no office, designated office area. Those are probably not good environments, right?
Yeah, you got to have serious people to work at home. And let's face it, you can't raise kids and work at home and be doing that all in one. That's a farce, and we all know that. It takes hard work to make money, but it takes the right people being around you. It takes the right ideas. I'm a big believer in a muse. I don't know, we've never talked about this, but I imagine you are too. Do you think you have a muse?
What do you mean by that?
Do you think you have some kind of inspiration around you that you can't sense that's helping you with your success?
Huh. I never thought about it like that. No, just maybe just the, again, my family environment I described, like with my wife, handling things with the family. Again, I'm able to get more active with the family now that I'm not, as pressured because of the, sale to private equity and getting this cash infusion to run the company. But no, I think it just maybe a lot of different things, the entrepreneurial side, the family side, and then I enjoy the sales and marketing, like I said, and the technology piece of our industry, more than the insurance part of it even. So that always excites me because everything keeps evolving, like we just described, and how, monumental things can change within 4 or 5 years. And of course, now with like your, open AI and Chat GPT and other AI models that are coming, trying to figure out how to integrate that into what we're going to be doing in the future is pretty cool too.
Yeah. Have you heard of, and just going back to this, I'm fascinated to talk to you about this. Have you ever heard of the paradigm of the red car? And it's how many red cars did you see on the road the last time you were out? I don't know if you went out today, but I take it you can't tell me, right? Like you don't know the number of red cars you saw. But if somebody were to say to you, and again, you're the ambassador of money to me, at least over time, which is fantastic. But if somebody said to you, I'll give you $500 for every red car you see the next time you're on the road, you would probably be more cognizant of how many red cars you saw. And if somebody said, how many did you see? And you'd say, well, I saw X amount. What that phenomena is about is that that's how luck works. And my thinking is going back to thinking that you have a muse and you have something around you that's inspiring you, whether that's your lineage, your family history, your father. There's something there that's doing that I think you don't miss an opportunity. I think you're the type of guy that you're always looking through the lens of opportunity. And think of how many people are just letting those red cars just pass by and not counting. And I don't think one passes by you that you miss. And something I learned from you was that I was going to take the best of what I saw in you and try to be like that myself. And so I'm constantly looking for opportunities. I'm constantly trying to look at the bright side of things, trying to see that people are so much more valuable than maybe they even thought they were. But I want to tell you, as a friend and a mentor of mine in the past, that you add value to people by valuing them. And you certainly showed a lot of value to me, and you added value to me. So there's just something there that, I'm going to pass on this legacy. I'm going to keep going. I know you are too, but man, like I said, I can't be more proud of you. I was so proud to work for you. Every time I would see success, it was like it was written in the stars with you. There was just something there that we were like Belichick and Brady, buddy. Let's go.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, some fun stuff.
It was, man. I just can't thank you enough. Do you want to go over anything else? Do you feel good about this?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, I think the last piece of the puzzle, or some of the other pieces, were back into the offshore scenario pieces, is that trying different forms of offshore. I'm still, playing with it. When we first started, of course, we had India. That was a huge part of it. We also, we talked about from a telemarketing piece, we had the part about using Philippines because of their voice, and then having to adjust to that if they've got that Hispanic style voice, having them calling into California, Arizona, New York, New Jersey. That was a good place for them to do the telemarketing because of the Hispanic accent is more common, in
That's
those
smart.
areas. So having to make that adjustment there. And then also recently using Colombia, which is what we would call near shore, because it's 2 hours from Miami in the central time zone, and their English accents are phenomenal. Their U.S. accents are phenomenal. They are more like employees in that you still get the same similar cost savings. Like maybe instead of 1,200 a month for 40 hours, you pay $2,000 a month for 40 hours. But it's like they are actually your employee. Like they're recruited by the nearshore firm, but you actually interview and hire them, and they can wear your shirts, have logo, walls behind them, and it's someone you can actually have a Zoom meeting with, and and train and speak to. Unlike in India, where the management team trains a bullpen,
Right.
of
Well, and in
40.
fairness, in India, it's the middle of the night when we're in business, correct?
Yes.
So they were kind of okay. So that's a difference too. Like you said, Central Time with Colombia, India is obviously day and night from us. So yeah, that was a little different.
True, and then we did have a workforce on East Coast time and West Coast time in India also, because they did luckily have that feature. But as much as, of course, they could just do, while we're asleep, the better. It fits with their time zone better. But anyway, there is a good we've had in the nearshore side, we had a few underwriters turnover, and I actually had one of the managers on the nearshore train a U.S. underwriter on our processes. That's how good it can be, and they verbally trained on Zoom, go to
Wow.
meeting, and it wasn't just written documents, So there's a lot that you can get out of the different areas of the world from their expertise. Also, certain areas like Israel for technology, like
Mhm.
things you don't think about. You think about, India for the tech side. And then from an accounting perspective, India is really great for that, where maybe the nearshore piece in Colombia or Latin America is not as much, unless it's more of an international, client. But so anyway, I'm thinking that exploring these virtual assistants and back office folks are great, and then soon to be layered in the new AI agents, which will be that they can now take over certain specific tasks, going out and looking at an email, gathering a policy document, saving it, naming it, saving it in your agency management system.
Mm.
That's literally on the horizon. There exists now, but it has a lot of training that needs to be done. But what I'm seeing and hearing through, even OpenAI, ChatGPT, they're creating these agents to work very quickly without very little training. which I know everyone in our world likes because we don't have the time.
Right. Something I remembered about you that was so funny is you were always ethical, but we would push some boundaries sometimes. And there was sometimes you were just funny about the way that you would express things. So one thing you said to me was you would say, Chad, don't reinvent the wheel. Just copy what works somewhere else. And when I was asking you, how have you figured out the success or whatever, and you were like, look, just figure out what another company's doing well and figure out a way to implement those good things in your company. And that's what we were doing. And I remember we were getting more automated. I think it might have been when you were designing an app, and you said something like, and I thought this was so brilliant because there's actually a South Park about this, where you said, we're going to have an agree, disagree, like disclaimer. And we're going to make that thing so long that people are just going to scroll through it and go agree. And I just thought that is so true to the world, right? And there wasn't going to be anything funny in it, but it was one of those things that's the way the world is. And that was just so innovative to me.
Like a software agreement, like Apple, when they update the terms, are you going to read those, all that? Or are you going to hit I agree? I mean, some people will read it, or, have it. I think we even had a way you could email it to yourself if you want to print it out.
Right.
Yeah,
no, I just thought that was so smart. And you were funny and playful about the way you conducted your business, even though you were very serious. And, we were talking about outworking people. Not only would you respond to emails all time of the night, but I don't think you ever left the office before 6:30 at night. I mean, I would be up there sometimes, and it was an executive office. And I loved going up there and seeing you. And I tell you, it was just like you were always working. And sometimes we'd go to lunch for 30 minutes or something, but it was like you were just a worker and you were willing to outwork anybody. And if somebody was watching this and was like, I wonder how I could be more like Eric Stein and less like Chad Carpenter, I would say, why don't you just outwork everybody for years, get very smart, and then figure out that anybody you hire is not going to be as good as you are. And I think that's what you were willing to take that mantra and beat that drum and then help the rest of us. But you had really a nose for talent. I mean, you really hired some good people. And I mean, from a service level, from an underwriting standpoint, from a sales standpoint, you just had a nose for figuring out who knew how to get the job done. And it was just a pleasure. It's such an amazing experience to work with you. And I'm so glad all these years later, we're still together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even though we work for different companies, we still can have this kind of
Hey, we're still allies. We're going to play golf one day. We're going to go to Lifetime Fitness. Let's go.
You're funny. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you kind of walking through it. And, I think we may have missed some areas in the book, but maybe we'll do a part 2.
Let's do a part 2. Man, I really had a great time talking to you, and being a part of what you've got going on is amazing.
No, I appreciate it, man. Thanks again for being on, brother. I'll get you your swag out as soon as this is over.
You've already done it, man. You've done so much for me. Thank you.
Thanks again for tuning in to Insurance Shop Talk. If you enjoyed our deep dive into the latest trends, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, I'm Eric Stein, and this has been Insurance Shop Talk.